if you're Putin, basically what he's facing is a meat grinder of his own, but it's his own economy. Now, I think he can survive that. I don't think it means Russia's going to collapse, but I don't know that he can expand his war any more than he is on a conventional basis. I think 2026 for him, if he continues this war, it's just a holding year until his economy and his manpower shortages can be overcome. If they're capable of overcoming them, I'm not so sure.
Hello and welcome to our program. Today, our guest is Mark Toth, a security and foreign affairs policy analyst, and welcome to our program.
Sophia, great to see you again here in the new year. Thank you.
It's our first interview in a new year, and let me ask you straight up, what kind of the year are we walking into? Especially, is it a turning point for the Russian war against Ukraine or more of the same?
Yes, Sophia, I think as I sit back and I look at this, my real takeaway for this coming year is it's very clear now we're in a world that has no rules. And I think that's going to inform a lot of what happens over the course of the next 12 months. The old rules are completely gone. And Putin started destroying those in 2022. We invaded your country. China has piled on by basically saying, look, we agree. We want to throw out these rules as well so that we can do things like menace Filipino shipping, encircle Taiwan to send messages to Taipei that you need to capitulate, become part of China again. And I think that's the world that Ukraine is going to have to be fighting in. It's a world that just doesn't have these traditional rules that would have otherwise protected a country like Ukraine in this situation. And so, in terms of that, I think with respect to Putin, he realizes that. And the way that he's going to go about fighting this is continuing to try to do it on a global basis, but also continuing to try to just hold on in Ukraine until his economy and his military can recover. I don't see peace happening, unfortunately, in 2026. But again, my overall assessment is when we look at everything today as we talk about this, it's just a world without rules. We saw that in Venezuela again, is just one other example.
There is a lot of talks, at least I read the Sunday Times, that Vladimir Putin, that stakes for him this year have never been higher. And my question is, how vulnerable is Russia heading into this year? And is Putin running out of options, or does he still believe that time on his side?
Yeah, there's a disconnect. Colonel John Street, my writing partner, and I have written about this before, I think, with Putin in reality. I think whether he doesn't want to see reality or just skims over reality, or if his generals are lying to him, he doesn't understand that the battlefield is pretty much stagnant. Yes, there are Russian advances, but they're at a foot's pace. I think, though, if you look at overall the Russian economy, especially the engine that has to fuel his war machine, I mean, they're reaching a point of stagnation. I mean, when you look at it, their GDP was 5.9% in 2021. It's down to most likely a negative point, I'm sorry, 0.6% in 2025. I mean, it's coming to a halt. Inflation remains high at 8%, and interest rates are at 16%. There's a manpower shortage happening in Russia right now, where unemployment is historically low there. They can't grow their economy anymore. And you're seeing that in terms of hard numbers just come out with respect to their defense spending. It's pretty much capped out. They're not increasing it for 2026 and 2025. It's going to be basically the same. So as an economy, they're in trouble. And then their biggest source right now, hard currency to fund that, the oil, your country's doing a magnificent job of eroding that by as much as 25%. They had projected like $138 billion of oil revenue. It's down to 106 billion. So it's had an impact. So, if you're Putin, basically what he's facing is a meat grinder of his own, but it's his own economy. Now, I think he can survive that. I don't think it means Russia's going to collapse, but I don't know that he can expand his war any more than he is on a conventional basis. I think 2026 for him, if he continues this war, it's just a holding year until his economy and his manpower shortages can be overcome. If they're capable of overcoming them, I'm not so sure.
And actually, that's a very interesting point. And how real is that pressure for Putin? Especially, do you think that he actually worry about the backlash inside Russia?
At this point, look, Putin has survived multiple times where there's been obviously extreme pushback in Russia. We saw that early on with Yevgeny Prigozhin when he attempted to take his paramilitary groups all the way up from Rostov, all the way up towards Moscow, only for that to fail, only for Putin most likely to have killed him in a plane crash. He survived that. I think in terms of any real substantive type internal revolt, that was probably the one last best opportunity. I don't see that happening right now. I think he's consolidated his power. I think the oligarchs are along for the ride, whether they like it or not, and the security services remain firmly in control. I think more of his problem is just facing the reality that he may want to achieve more on the battlefield, but his economy can't keep up with that. I think that's his biggest threat. But, dictatorships die hard. Throughout history, they don't go away easily. We saw that with Nazi Germany. And we've seen it with Putin lasting through this war, even though it's done great damage to his economy. And then I just would point out he does have one remaining card to play in terms of buying time for his economy. Historically, Russian spending or borrowing, I should say, is low compared to most Western countries. He can buy time that way by borrowing his way through this, especially if China or someone steps up. So I don't see his economy collapsing, but I don't see it expanding to help him win this war. He's stuck.
Another interesting situation in the end of 2025, we've heard that Putin tried to accuse Ukraine of attacking his residents. And just a couple days ago, Donald Trump said he does not believe Russia's claims that Ukraine attacked Putin's residence. What's your take on that situation and that finally Trump did not believe in Putin words?
Yeah, no, I mean, huge egg on Putin's face. I mean, it really was a classic. There's an old-time comedy show in the United States called The Three Stooges, and Putin, his generals, and the people that advised him to try to play this game all came off like the Three Stooges. They look like fools. I mean, the U.S. has probably, I mean, obviously, not probably, but has the premier intelligence capabilities around the world. I mean, we've had 200 plus military satellites. We can track those things. We know exactly when things go off. We can determine what the targeting is. It was very clear from the get-go that Ukrainians were not targeting his residence there in Valdez. And so for him to try and come out and do that, for him to try, as he did back when he first tried to intercept the Tomahawks the first time around, I think he just thought he was going to be clever. And yeah, Trump initially bought, he made some statements early on after hearing it that he was, not happy about it, angry about it. But once his intelligence services got to him to basically say, look, this did not happen, it backfired on him. So it was very encouraging to see Trump come out on Air Force One, releasing that announcement that he did is, look, we don't believe you. Putin looks like a fool. Now he's responding to that. We're seeing yet more efforts by the Russians to say, oh, wait, we just haven't gotten you the right information. We're going to get that to you. They're not going to fool U.S. intelligence services. It's a lie. It always was a lie, and it's going to continue to be a lie. So Zelensky is right to call it out right away as he did.
Another interesting topic, which we start this year, is of course the situation in Venezuela, and you already mentioned that is we are getting into the world without rules. What does the whole situation mean for Russia? And do you see that now Moscow is weakening its positions in Latin America?
Yeah, no, look, people can debate whether it should have happened or shouldn't have happened. I'm just going to look at the takeaways now that it has happened. There is an opportunity here for the West because of what Venezuela had represented, not just to Russia, and in terms of Rosneft, their oil company, being able to do business deals to add to their economy by working with the Venezuelan oil industry, not just because of what China and buying roughly 80% of the oil exports from Venezuela can do, but also because of countries like Cuba that, basically some people argue hijacked the country. There were 30 30,000 Cuban soldiers in Venezuela supporting or were the Maduro regime. Now, Delcy Rodriguez is the interim president. You've got that dynamic. Then you also have Iran, another partner, and there's a pattern here if you see it. These are all partners of Putin that are enabling him to continue his war in Ukraine. Well, you also have Iran that was helping fund Hezbollah through illegal drug activity there, as well as illegal oil shadow fleet shipping that was reaching Lebanon as well to help Hezbollah raise funds. So a lot of things start to tumble there. You've got Iran that's affected by it. You've got China that's affected by it. You have Russian oil interests that are affected by it. You have Cuba potentially affected by it. So there are some positives that can come out of that madness. However, the big question mark there remains is how do you affect all of that? Because at this point, there's no U.S. boots on the ground in Venezuela. There is a blockade that's continuing. The sanctions continue. But if you're going to ultimately change that permanently, then there has to be some kind of plan to get you from where we're at now to a post Chinese, Russia, heavily influenced Venezuela. Just don't see that yet. And I know people on Capitol Hill yesterday were saying, yeah, we don't see it either. We see the potential positives, but how do you bring this home, as they say? How do you land the plane? Trump's got to make that more clear. Time will tell.
And how these events could actually influence and split over into the Russian war against Ukraine. Do
Yeah,
you
no,
see?
I think it's all good, right? Right. And I realize I didn't answer the last part of that question. My apologies. It's potentially good because look, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the show, oil revenues are already down for Russia by as much as 25%. If you take another source of revenue that Rosneft, the huge, and Lukoil would be another that have huge contracts in Venezuela, that's diminishing Russia's returns all the more. So this again, this year, there's probably two fights going on here. There's the fight on the battlefield that your fellow countrymen are bravely fighting, but there's also this economic fight that Russia can't win. They're just kind of treading water. This makes it harder for them to tread water because it takes a key economic partner away from them. They also lose egg, more egg on their face. It's not been a good year for Putin. Look, he lost, over the last, year. Bashir Assad, left Syria, toppled. You've got Maduro now toppled. You have Iran teetering, another key axis of evil ally of Putin's. That Trump is sending signals that maybe the same thing's going to happen to Supreme Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, that he may wake up and find U.S. Special Forces apprehending him. So it's a big plus for Ukraine on the battlefield because now Putin has something else to worry about. There's different dynamics. His global war against the West is starting to fall apart. And while he's struggling to do anything aside to put space progress in Ukraine. So it's a net positive for Ukraine, I think is a good thing, as long as ultimately Russian influence is eliminated from Venezuela. That's to be determined still.
Uh, I read in some Ukrainian media that some journalists and experts afraid of that Russia could use this situation to justify their future actions, actually, as usually they do. Do you have any fear regarding this?
It's a catch-22, Sophia, because yes, on the surface, the argument is that it can justify it. But I would argue if you step back and you look at this, Putin has already justified what he's doing. He doesn't need new excuses. That may be good PR marketing, but it doesn't change anything. He already invaded your country. He doesn't need an excuse to do that. Um, China, on the flip side of that coin, is also already threatening Taiwan. They've blockaded that country 6 different times since the war in Ukraine started in different kinds of major ways where they've completely encircled it. They don't need the excuse. Now they'll use it. They'll take it as a PR win, a diplomatic win, and basically say, oh, look, Trump is doing this. But I would argue to people that say somehow that's some green light that's being sent to China and to Russia. No, it's not, because they've already proceeded as though there was a green light in existence since, February 24th of 2022. So again, I think people should pay attention to actions, not words. China's and Russia's actions have been, we don't care, Good thing that, Trump's given us a PR win, but that didn't stop us to begin with. It's not going to stop us going forward.
Let me switch for another topic is, of course, Greenland, because Denmark's prime minister says she believes Trump is serious about this whole situation. And for me, it's very interesting. Is it a strategic concern for the country, and how it could also, maybe even influence on the on European allies of the US, this whole situation?
Yeah, look, Greenland is vital to the security of the United States. Now, I don't agree. And in fact, in my Substack with John Sweet, we just wrote about this, that militarily seizing Ukraine, Greenland is off the table. That's not something the United States should be in the business with, especially given that Greenland is controlled, owned, if you will, by a fellow NATO ally. So that's got to be a non-negotiating thing. But in terms of global warming causing the Northern Sea route to open up, there are new risks there in terms of the Arctic, obviously Arctic exploration, that makes those northern passages more dangerous to the U.S. that the U.S. has to be able to defend. Well, I think Trump, again, only he knows for sure, but I think a lot of this is hyperbole. He has a tendency of trying to create maximum pressure to create leverage in the negotiation process. I just saw some reports that he's trying to enter into some similar deals that we have with other countries where we would help defend on a more treaty type basis, Greenland, which would give us added rights, but not actually go for outright ownership. But it also has a really real impact because just today alone, you've got your president, Volodymyr Zelensky, that's meeting in Paris with dozens of other European leaders to talk about a collective security agreement. And yet here is Trump, based on just the Danish Prime Minister Fredriksen's own comments, destroying another collective organization, NATO, by threatening its territory. So there is that catch-22 that I don't think serves Trump well optic-wise, that he needs to realize, look, if I want the peace plan to proceed, if I want to get these security guarantees in place so that Ukraine can move forward on its side and potentially get Putin to sign off on them, that all comes down to security guarantees, and those security guarantees only work if there's a collective defense. So he can't be arguing for a collective defense based on Europe on the one hand, and then undermining that collective defense by trying to strip away Greenland sovereignty-wise from Denmark. It's just contradictory and doesn't make sense. But again, I think it's just all about leverage. It's all about negotiating, and he's right to do it at a geostrategic level. Greenland is important, but he's wrong the way that he's going about it.
And as you already mentioned about the meeting in Paris, indeed, today European leaders, Ukrainian president and US special envoy are meeting there. And um, is it just another meeting, or do you expect any real achievement there, maybe for uh, security guarantees for Ukraine, or the agreement on the deployment of the Western troops on the ground after a ceasefire?
Yeah, given what Trump has done in Greenland, I think it's all the more important that Ukraine treat these security guarantee discussions as saying, Europe, really, what are you going to do for us? It's not enough for you simply to say, along the basis of Budapest or Minsk, of saying that you're going to give us security guarantees. There has to be some substantive backbone to them. That does mean European troops, in my opinion, on the ground in Ukraine. You need that barrier along the whatever that demilitarized zone looks like. They can't be outside because, as John Sweet has often pointed out, I think we've done it in past shows with you, that if you have these security guarantees, but all these forces are in other countries, how long does it take for them to respond? What level of response can they mount based on any given Russian future action that would be invading your country? And then what's the political fight to get that done? And then, as we've mentioned as well before, if the U.S. is ultimately backstopping all of that, has the U.S. Senate yet approved any of that? Is there a gray area of which the Senate's not approved yet, and a U.S. president could say, no, we're not going to do it? So I think it becomes incumbent upon Ukraine, especially Zelensky today, to say, look, if NATO is not the backbone of this, then Europe has to be that. And I think that has to involve troops on the ground. I think it has to involve, a coalition of the willing aircraft that are helping patrol actively Ukraine's skies. And I think Europe has to think better about its own satellite capabilities in terms of being able to monitor Russian activities. because right now they are too dependent on US satellites. They only have two military satellites of their own effectively full time, and that's just not sufficient coverage to make sure that you're seeing threats as they developed, as Russian forces might be moving around in the future, that type of thing. So if I'm Zelensky, I'm saying, look, if this is going to work, if we're going to protect you and you're going to protect us, we need real substantive things out of it. This just can't be a feel good kind of treaty that has no substance to it because you just can't afford a third guarantee after Budapest and Minsk that goes nowhere. And that's my biggest fear. I want to see something substantive. I'm afraid you're just going to get something that's watered down and not effective.
Mark, thank you very much for this conversation and for your deep analysis.
Great. Thank you, Sophia, and Happy New Year to you and all of the viewers. Thank you.
Thank you.